Start. So, good morning, everyone. My name is Shazia Khan, and today's unit that we'll be doing is unit called Academic Writing Skills. And we'll be doing Learning Outcome 1. For this session, there's 3 learning outcomes and 1 assignment discussion. So you'll be doing it today, tomorrow, and then next weekend as well. There's 3 learning outcomes and then there's the assignment discussion. And we'll start with the first one today, which is learning outcome 1, which is to use a range of skills and materials to plan a task and an assignment. So when we talk about academic writing skills, why is it so important? Why do you think academic writing skills is so important? Boniface, why do you think it's so important? Why do you think having good academic writing skill is important? Anyone, Justin?
I can say is a specific writing for
Yeah. Is it a different way of writing?
yes, please, it's
Yeah.
different.
Yeah. And so when we look at it, it's the fact that it's so important in different sense, in the fact that, people write differently. People have a different style of writing. And also, academically, you need to write in a certain way.
Yeah,
And it's really important because, if you're presenting something or you're researching something, there's different ways of writing. Claude, have you just joined? Yeah? Claude, okay.
Yes, yes.
Okay. So let me just. Right, so when we look at the key terminology here, so what is writing for academic purposes? Now, academic writing includes things like, you're writing for an essay, a lab report. It could be where you kind of communicate ideas and information to a wider academic community. So you're giving them information. And sometimes there's different types of academic writing. You can have a student who's writing academic piece of work, who's at university or preparing for, exams and things, or preparing for assignments. And then, you can have an expert outside who's writing a book or anything, or publication, and that could be an academic piece of work as well. So it's really important that you identify the different types of academic pieces of work. And why it's important. So, you are there to make sure that you try to persuade the audience, inform them, analyze them, and synthesize. So you're there to, identify that there's a need for this academic writing. So there are certain standards different institutions use. And, they need to make sure when you're doing an academic piece of work, what do you need to make sure when you're doing an academic piece of work? Do you need to make sure about the structure? Claude, what do you need? Do you need to make sure about the structure? That it's a good structure?
You should have keywords.
Yeah, but should it be good structure? Should it have a good structure so the person reading it is able to identify that, it's easy to read?
Yeah, it should have a
Yeah, yeah,
keyword and then
yeah. It should
yes,
be well structured.
yeah.
It should be critical, like we said, analysis. It should be precise and it should be formal, okay? And there's different types of academic writing, and they include things like, abstract. We have annotated bibliographies, academic journal articles, book reports, conference paper, dissertations, research proposals, essays, assignments, any sort of lab reports that could be, a form of academic writing. And these are the fact that we write academically, so we're able to, you know, write in a professional manner. So 1.1. Yesterday, I just need to stop sharing and I think, let me just, sorry, I don't know what's happened there. Can you see the slides now? Yeah. So,
Yes.
yeah, excellent. 1.1, to interpret the meaning and implications of specific questions. So in this section, you will gain a better understanding of academic writing. The ability to communicate ideas to an audience is an important skill in any sphere, no less important in academic writing. Why is it so important that you are able to communicate your work, your writing to a big audience? Why is it so important? If you are, an example, you are a PhD student, you need to get your work across to the audience, the rest of the group. Why is it important that you have that ability to communicate? Why is communication so important? That Portia? Is it Portia? Can you hear me? Yeah?
Yeah.
Why is it so important that you have the ability to communicate your ideas and everything to an audience?
So that the people also understand you.
Excellent. The people to understand you, you know, and you are there to portray your ideas so that they're able to understand you. But the ultimate goal is that they're able to answer any questions as well. You're able to answer any question. You need to explain your ideas, why you've done it like this, why you've done it like that. So you need to be able to be prepared for that. Interpreting the meaning. So it's important to be aware of different types of questions. There are two types of question known as closed questions and open questions, okay? And they're the most common ones that are used in questionnaires and if people are portraying a question to you in an audience. So closed questions are usually answers with a simple yes or no. For example, are you feeling all right today? Or an example would be, do you like ice cream? Did you go on holiday? The close answer to that is either a yes or a no. Whereas you've got an open question, which actually invites the person to provide information on how they feel and what they think about the subject area. So this usually starts with a question and requires more description or analysis. So open questions are how, who, why, what, or where. And you know, it could be things like, you know, tell me about yourself, or how would you describe yourself? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? So these are questions that are open questions. Your assignment or examination question will be an open question. This is to give you the opportunity to explain, analyze, and answer the question in some detail. To be successful, you need to interpret the meaning of the question. To answer an assignment or examination question effectively, you need to analyze the meaning of the question and to be able to identify the different parts of the question, and all need consideration in your answer. You will decide what you must put in the piece of academic writing to adequately answer the specific question. The best way to explain this is with an example. So why is it so important in any assessment that you read the question and you answer what the question is asking you? Do sometimes people read the question and then talk about something else? What do you think, Alishba? Do you think people sometimes misconstrue what the question is asking them? Claude, what do you think?
No idea.
What about, Claude, what if you're reading an assignment, okay? And you read the question, but you don't analyze the meaning of the question. Sometimes you can answer the question wrong, can't you?
Yes, you can
Yeah.
answer the question wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, so sometimes it's very, very important that you analyze the meaning of the question and identify what it's asking you. Because, Claude, if the question says to you, talk about communication effectively, and you only need to talk about it in 200 words, you
Mhm.
can talk about it in 500 words and you probably get it all wrong. So,
Yeah.
yeah, so you need to be really careful. And through my experience of teaching, I've seen students that have done that. You know, they've read a question and then not answered what the question is asking them. So, you know, if you've got a word limit and things, be thorough, identify the question itself and identify what the question is asking you.
Mm.
Because, you know, sometimes people talk about everything. And I've had students that have talked, you know, it's a 600-word essay and they've talked about 2,000 words about the area. So, but they've not talked about, for example, let me give you an example. I've asked students to talk about the advantages and disadvantages of plea bargaining in the UK, you know, like when you go to court and things. And they've talked about what plea bargaining is. They've talked about the principles of plea bargaining, but they've not answered the advantages and disadvantages. So they've just talked everything about plea bargaining, but not identified what I'm asking, what the question's asking. So it's really clear, really important that you need to analyze what the meaning of the question is, and you're able to identify in the question different parts that you need to answer. So interpreting the meaning of the question. Sorry, that's the next. So question, this is an example of a question, okay? So you've got, does describe the possible implications a diagnosis of hypertension would have on a patient attending their GP surgery. Now in this, when you're looking at this question, you need to ask yourself, what instructions have I been given? What have I been told to do? So in this question, what have you been told to do? Anyone, just come up with some example. I mean, it is highlighted below, but I just want to see if you can, in the question. So it says, describe the implications, possible implications of a diagnosis of hypertension would have on a patient attending their GP surgery.
It will, you have to know first of all what hypertension is for you to talk about it, and you have to describe how.
Excellent. What is the important word? Describe, isn't it?
To talk about the hypertension.
Yeah, but the important words are there, aren't they? So what am I able to ask the question? What judgments put here? So here is where you've highlighted the important points. So describe. It's telling you to describe, okay? And here it wants you to identify the possibilities. Then, like you said, it's asking you about implications of diagnosis of hypertension. That's the second highlighted part. And this, how would this have an impact on a patient? So when you look at analyzing that, so when you analyze that, you look at what instructions have I been given? Okay, so number one, so what instructions? So you've been asked to describe, haven't you, in this question? Okay, here the question wants you to identify the possibilities. This is an example question, okay? This is not your essay question. So this is an example question, okay? Then you look at number two. What am I being asked to do in the question? As Portia mentioned, you're looking at hypertension, aren't you? You're looking at considering what hypertension is. And this is from the brief example that I mentioned, the question that we've looked at. There's a lot of information that can be gleaned from this question. If you focus on hypertension and go into great detail about it, is what it is and how it's caused, you would miss the major point of the meaning of the question, which is about the implications this diagnosis might have on the patient's life. So taking time to read the question carefully and really understand what you are being asked. So you're not being asked what is hypertension, are you? You're being
No.
asked, no, you're being asked of the implications on the patient. So you need to answer the question properly. So you
Are we
also,
allowed to use this question as our essay
no, it's not an
question?
essay. No, it's a sample question. It says, I've said it's an example question.
Okay.
It's not your assignment question.
Do
So
we have a question for an assignment question?
the assignment's in week 4. In next week, we discuss that. So you will get something around that area next week. Okay, so these are just the learning outcomes that we need to go through, so you have an idea that you may be able to look at it from this perspective, or this is just giving you a sample of an kind of how to analyze a question. And what you must consider when you get a question. It's really important what wording you must consider rather than just going into the question, because this question is not asking you about what is hypertension. This question is asking you about the implications on the patient. So this is just a sample, an example for you, okay? So they may not have any idea that they had a high blood pressure. So number 3, what judgments am I being asked to make? So here you're making possible implications. So you're asked to think carefully about what this diagnosis may mean for the patient. Is it going to be a positive one or negative experience? And will it have any implications for the patient? So that is what the question is asking you. So if you go back to the question, it's at the top. It's asking you to describe the possible implications a diagnosis of hypertension would have on a patient attending their GP's surgery. So do you understand that you're describing what implications rather than describing what hypertension is? So 1.2, you identify appropriate terms and concepts relevant to understanding of the specific question. So you identify key concepts here. When you are presented with a question to answer, it is vital that you're able to pick out the important elements of the question and then form a structured response to the question. Why is it so important to have a structured response? What would you be doing if you don't have a structured response of what you need to do? What do you think?
It helps you to construct your essay well.
Excellent.
And know the right keywords to use.
Yes. Yes, Portia, it's very, very important that you have a structure, because the person reading it is able to understand that you've answered the question well and you know what you're talking about, rather than, going off tangent and talking about something else. So, there are many clues that you can make from, can be taken from the wording of the question that will allow you to have a better understanding of exactly what is expected of you. Questions will contain things like command words, and they will tell you how you need to answer the question. For example, you may need to describe it, maybe you may need to suggest, explain, analyze. So these are things that you may need to do. So these are giving you an idea of what is expected of you. So the next one is, these are some examples, okay, of questions. They are just that, how they have been presented. Okay, so these are just examples, but they're slightly different. So first one is to explain the difference between prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells. And here you are asked to not only identify the difference between them in biology, but also asked to give reasons as to why they are different. So you are asked, do you understand that question? If you read that question, explain the difference between prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells. So you asked what is the difference between them and why are they different? Okay. And then you've got another example of a question, which is describe the difference between prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells. Here you would answer giving the key characteristics of different cells, but there would be no expectation of a set of reason for those differences to be included. So these, look how they're worded. So describe, explain, and the next one is analyze. The above graph, set of data or photograph and explain why this is a phenomenon has happened. So here the questions are slightly different. It's asking you for a piece of evidence that has been presented to you and draw out what evidence shows. For example, you could be presented with a weather chart, a graph showing any sort of different makeup of populations in two different cells as first example. The question is asking you to analyze the evidence presented to you, in essence, to say what you see and make an argument on why this is happening. So these are just some examples of similar areas where the questions have been, you know, analyzed differently. So you're looking at explaining, describing, and analyzing. So explain the difference between prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells. Please include examples to support your answer. So this is just giving you, again, an example. So this statement means that you must include evidence in your answer, for example, to back up and support your description of these two types of cells. Why is it so important when you look at, why is it so important to support your answer with evidence?
It gives you the in-depth of what you've wrote about.
Okay, so it gives the reader an in-depth idea of what you're talking about. But
Yes.
it also, do you think it backs up your statement
Yes.
to show that you've got evidence?
Yes.
Yes. And where you've got the evidence from is really important as well. So the two types, using examples in the context of academic writing allows the writer to show that they have read around the subject. Using examples allows the writer to show that they are able to make connections between the theory of the subject they have asked to write and the application of the theory. The primary distinction between that eukaryotic cells have men's cells do not. The nucleus is where. So, you know, these are examples, okay? These are not the assignment question, because I think some people may have got confused. These are only examples for you to know when we talk about analyze, when we talk about describe, so at least you understand the wording of it. So here you're looking at the difference when we looked at the questions, the difference of prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells. And what we've done in a table is identify the difference between both. So you've got on one side prokaryotic cells, and then you've got eukaryotic cells, and you've identified the difference between each one. And that is where you're looking at describing the difference between each one. And it's quite clear, even from a diagram, the difference between each one. And why is it sometimes clear to have it in a diagram? Why do you think it's clear to sometimes have it in a diagram if you're talking about the difference of something? Or in this instance, prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells. Why do you think it's sometimes easier for people to put it in a diagram? Lishba, why do you think it's so it's easier for someone to have it in a diagram?
Just so it's more visual.
Yeah, and do you think, Lishba, that it's easy to understand for the reader as well, that you've put it in a table and you've identified the difference between each one?
Yeah.
Yeah, so, you know, you need to be aware that you're able to identify a difference. People do it differently, okay? Some do it in an academic form where they write it all down, the difference between prokaryotic cell and eukaryotic cells are but some people put it in a diagram, and diagram is more visual, again, like Elishba said, but it's easy for the person to understand that you're understanding what the question has said. The table below shows command words, okay, and their meaning. So, you know, you might have command words that say analyze. Analyze is really important, and that means that you identify the main characteristics, explain how they relate together. Then you have assess, which means to present different viewpoints and develop an informed judgment. Then you have compare and contrast, and that's what we've been looking at when we would be looking at the example question. So any sort of similarities and differences. Then you've got critically examine, and that will be to investigate closely and include strengths and limitations. And then define. So here you would provide a clear, precise meaning. And you've got describe, which is provide the main characteristic features with accuracy. Another word is discuss. So here you would discuss an in-depth account, including various viewpoints. And then evaluate. So here you would make a judgment based on evidence, including your strengths and weaknesses. We've got someone else who's joined. Abigail?
Yes.
You've joined as well. Let me just
Yes.
I think people are struggling with the link. Just 1 minute. Right, okay, so we'll go on to the next slide, which is looking at just 1 minute. Harvard referencing. Okay, and this again is really, really important bit of any of your assignments. Any of your assignments that you are doing, you have to use Harvard referencing. Okay, and that is what, does anyone know what Harvard referencing is? Abigail, do you know what Harvard referencing is?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
Claude. Okay, what is Harvard referencing then? Anyone? What do you think?
So
Is it-
Harvard referencing is like, let's say when you go on the internet, like
Yeah.
your researches that you made, you have to provide your source, the name of the author, the year that that information was provided or was on the internet. Like you have to give the details of everything.
Why is it so important?
To avoid plagiarism and
It's really important. It's very good what you've just said, Abigail, and it's really important that you reference your source, because why is it your work?
no, it's someone's work that you are using, and also to avoid plagiarism.
Yes,
That your
that's
work will not be.
Yes, that's the biggest thing, is detection of plagiarism. So, you know, when you reference your work, it needs to be referenced properly so that you are using different styles. And the one that we use at UK Varsity and for every assignment is Harvard referencing system. So in the main text, you would have the author and the date. And when you're doing the reference list at the back, you would have the full citation. And it's for academic referencing. And it's so important that sources that you are using are cited within the body of your assignment by the author and the date of publication. All the rest of the details are given in the reference list, as I've said, and the bibliography at the back. So it's really relevant, that details, because, you know, it's not your work, like Abigail said, it's not your work. It is someone else's work that you are using to identify maybe a quote, or you are putting in there, if it's looking at something, a definition, but you need to quote that. It's not your piece of work, okay? And this looks at things like, you know, that you don't, it's not plagiarized. That is really important. Plagiarism is really important because your assignment will fall back in the rate of plagiarism, okay? You need to identify where you've got your work for. And sometimes people, what they do is they get so much work out of, you know, sources and books and things. Do not do that as well. Too much, you know, taking too much out will not help you, you know, lower your plagiarism report. So you need to be really careful. Does everyone know how to reference? There's websites, there's generators online that you could look at, and a popular one is something called Neil's Toolbox. Has anyone heard of that one?
Yes.
I'm sure I must have had you as another group and I've shown you it before, but what I'll do is I'll show you that, and that could help you generate a reference to put in your reference list or bibliography. And when you do your reference list and your bibliography, you need to make sure it's chronological order and it's in alphabetical order. So your authors are in alphabetical order, because I've seen bibliographies where people have put all work. So for example, if you've got an author that says Albert, he needs to be at the top, not at the bottom. If you've got an author that says Zainab, she needs to be at the bottom. So you need to make sure that it's all in alphabetical order, okay? And when you're citing in your main text, you need to make sure that you've got the author's name and the date of publication. And Harvard referencing comes in two parts, as we've stated. The citation in the main text of your work, and then reference at the back, as we mentioned. And there's a video that how to reference and how to do Harvard referencing and why it's required. And there's also a presentation on Moodle in regards to that. So if you struggle with that, okay, what we're going to do now is I'm going to put the video on for you on Harvard referencing. So let me just. So the video you've just watched is really good on Harvard referencing, how you would reference using Harvard referencing, but also looking at paraphrasing. And, this is all, the whole point of using the Harvard referencing is to avoid any sort of plagiarism. It showed you how to paraphrase. It also showed you that you need to, how you do the end of text reference list, and why Harvard referencing is important, and how it keeps you organized, and how your references are formatted. And it'll also give you an idea of how to reference professionally, because this will happen throughout your studies. As you go on further, you would be using it to avoid any sort of plagiarism. So in summary, today's session, we've covered different types of questions. So we've looked at open questions and closed questions, okay? Does anyone know what open, just to reiterate back to you, what's open questions? Anyone? What is an open question? Boniface, do you know what an open question is? What about a closed question? So a closed question is just the answer that you would give. For example, a yes or a no. So do you like ice cream? A yes or a no. That's a closed question, okay? An open question is more detailed. It invites you as the learner to, respond to a question with more information. We looked at the command words of describing, analyzing, and why we use these approach when we use these words, because it's so important to answer the question, what it's asking you, rather than moving away from what the question is. You need to answer what the question is asking you. And again, I will mention this, the importance of that, moving away from it. Grace, why do you think it's so important to answer what the question is asking you, rather than answer what you want to ask, what you think the question is asking you? Grace? Okay. Anyone? Abigail, why do you think it's so important to read the question properly and identify what the question is asking you, rather than write about what you want to write about?
I think because it's the way you answer the question will have impact on the marks too, on what you get.
Yeah, but sometimes, yeah. So the way you look at the question as well is take the command words out of it. You know what the question, and I'll just go back again to the question that we looked at as an example. And, you know, we looked at this question here. Can you see on the slides, it says, this was the sample question. It says, describe the possible implications a diagnosis of hypertension would have on a patient attending the GP surgery. Now, Portia said that it's asking you about hypertension, but is it asking you about what hypertension is? Remember, you can contribute because
Yeah.
it's no longer, yeah, but it's not really asking you about what hypertension is it? It's asking
Yes.
you the possible implications
Yeah.
rather than, so it's asking you to describe. Here it wants you to identify some possibilities, and then it wants you to look at the implications of hypertension. So it's not telling you to describe what hypertension is, it's looking at the possible implications of hypertension on a patient. So when you're reading the question, you know, what have I been asked to do? What have I been given? What instructions? And, you know, what are the judgments? So here you need to make sure that you are able to, you know, answer the question, what the question is asking you. You know, identify the key concepts, because it's so important you identify the key concepts. You can't move away from writing, you know, what you want to write. You need to write, you know, what's the question asking me? The information that I'm putting in the question, is it vital to the question? And, you know, are there any sort of cues that I could use, clues in the word? So the first word in that question, the example question, is describe, isn't it? So you really need to read the question to identify the implications of what you need to do for the question around that, okay? So make sure you read the question. So today we've looked at the command words, we've looked at obviously different types of wording to the importance of interpreting the meaning in types of questions. And these are some of the references that we've used for today's session, and a lot of the additional reading is on Moodle that you can look at, and also, you know, there's additional handouts and things like that that you can refer to on Moodle to help you when it comes to doing your assignment. So in your assignment, these are only example questions. You would have to I'd have to look at the assignment, but I think you'd have to come up with the question yourself, and then you'd have to work around that question. So you would get that more towards next week rather than identifying anything this week. Additional reading, as I've said, you've got how to interpret essay questions, learning outcome 1. How to interpret essay questions is on Moodle, and writing for academic purposes. These are additional reading on Moodle that you can go on and have a look at. And there's ebooks as well. Sorry. There's ebooks on Moodle that you can look at, and journals for this unit that you can refer to. And they will help you. Please, you know, take advantage of the resources you've got on Moodle, because they're going to help you get a better mark and also prepare the assignment as well. Any sort of questions or anything you've got, you can refer to, as it says, learnerwork@ukvarsity.co. And submission of your assignment is on learnerwork@ukvarsity.co.uk, and it's 2 weeks after completion of the unit. When it's been delivered and completion of the unit, then you would submit your assignment, okay? So you've got learning outcome 1, learning outcome 2, learning outcome 3, and then a smart assignment discussion for this academic writing skills unit. So the next session is tomorrow. Has anyone got any question about today's session?
No, for me.
No? Anyone else got any questions? Do you want me to show you let me just show you quickly. So you're on here, but I'll show you the toolbox that some of my students actually use. And it does help people. It's a generator. It's called Neil's. I'm sure I've had this group before, and I have shown you it before. But this is quite a good there's different generators online that you could use. You know, it doesn't necessarily mean you've got to use this one, but this is quite an easy one. Can you see this? It's called Neil's Toolbox. Can you all see?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
can.
So if you go onto that Harvard referencing generator, just click on that. It tells you if you want to reference a book, a magazine, an internet resource. Let's go on to books. So if you go on to book, so we'll put the author's name. Let's put Miller. Just an example. Sorry, the title of the book. Let's put academic skills. And then the author, Miller, the publisher, Peacock. And then location, London, year of publication, 2023. The edition could be first edition, 9th edition, whichever. Page number 78. Okay, so you go on to here, and then can you see this link here? It says generate reference. Can everyone see this, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you go to generate reference. What has it done? It's made it up for you. Can you see that? Can you all
Yes.
see this?
Yes.
It's made it up. It's put the dots and the commas and the all the colons and all the dots and commas and everything in the right place for you. So what you would do, you would copy and paste this into your bibliography.
Yeah.
And it would be you have to put it in alphabetical order. So from A, B down to Z, that would be up to you to do in alphabetical order. But this is a tool that you could use, to help you. It's called the Neil's Toolbox. And it is quite good for some people to use it. For others, it may not be that good. But for some people, it's a good tool to use. My students use it. They do the law degree and they use this. And it does help them because you'll just copy and paste that. You just have to put the details of the author, the book, the year, the publication, and it does help. So have a look at it. There's other generators online that you could look at that will help support you. But these generators are there for you to help you. Or if you want to do it on your own, okay? So again, any sort of questions or anything, learner work at ukvarsity.co.uk. And then we'll be doing tomorrow. Has anyone got any questions before we finish?
No.
No.
No? So the next session is tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's learning outcome 2.
Yes.
So it was nice to see all of you, speak to
Thank
all of you.
you.
And I will see you in tomorrow's
Hello,
session.
can I say something?
Yeah.
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 Josephine, as I
Hi,
did,
Josephine, you okay?
yeah, but I was finding it very difficult to log in, so I just logged in about I think 10 minutes ago, so I didn't follow the lecture. Can I get the record?
Okay. It's been recorded, Josephine, so don't worry about that. And once it's recorded, they'll send it to you. But what I tend to do is when it comes to the assignment session next week, I go through all learning outcomes again. So quickly, so people have a better idea. But what you need to do is the recording will be available for you as well, Josephine. And what I'll do is I'll send the new link for tomorrow's session. There is the same link on the WhatsApp for tomorrow's session as well.
Okay.
Okay, so it's all recorded and you could go on to that. And I've put the link in now for tomorrow's session. Okay,
All right. Thank
All
you.
so it's all
right.
recorded for you. Yes, Claude, is there any
Yeah, it's
questions?
fine. It's fine.
Okay, so I will see all of you tomorrow in tomorrow's session. Is that okay?
Thank
Any
you.
more questions? Alishba, have you got any questions or anything? No? Okay, so I will see you all in tomorrow's session. Thank you for attending today.
Yes.
Thank you.
you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
you.